Hello and welcome back to Grow Joyfully. Today I need to use some sourdough discard. So I'm going to make my bread like usual, and then I'm going to put half a cup of this discard in it. Now I did that before and I really liked it. It wasn't sourdoughy enough that even my grandkids noticed. So I think it's a good idea to use it for your gut health. And I need to be able to use it so you can see how tall it's getting in the jar. So let's get started. I got this recipe for sourdough discard hamburger buns from Farmhouse on Boone. I have talked about her several different times. But what I did was I just threw everything in. I didn't rise the yeast first. And I used the discard, and then I just used it as sandwich bread. And it turned out really well. I'm going to use my favorite flour, natural white premium all-purpose flour from Wheat, Montana. This recipe calls for 3/4 cup of warm milk, 2 teaspoons of yeast, 3 tablespoons of honey, 1 egg, 4 tablespoons of butter melted, 1/2 cup of discard, 3 cups of flour, and 1 teaspoon of salt. You can also have an egg and some water for the egg wash. But I'm going to double the recipe because I always do. What we're going to do is start with 1.5 cups of warm milk. I heated the milk up in the microwave, although I'm trying to use the microwave less, the more they learn about the waves or whatever that it transmits. So I heated it up for about 45 seconds because you don't want it too hot to kill your yeast. Now I am adding 4 teaspoons of yeast because I'm doubling the recipe. Okay, then we need to add 6 tablespoons of honey, again, because we are doubling the recipe. Okay, we're putting in 6 tablespoons of honey. Since we're doubling the recipe, it generally calls for 3. Honey's so good for you, but man, it is so sticky to work with. I have to wash the counter, the bottle, the lid of the bottle, the bottom of the bottle, but it's okay, it's good for us. And then we're going to add 2 farm fresh eggs. We're going to add 8 tablespoons of melted butter instead of the 4 tablespoons since we're doubling it. And if you look here on 1 stick of butter, it has 8 tablespoons in it, so that's 1 stick of butter. So here are the 8 tablespoons of melted butter. The 1 cup of sourdough discard, because I'm doubling the recipe. For a single recipe, it calls for 1/2 cup. 2 teaspoons of salt. And we will need 6 cups of sifted flour. This sifter holds 3 cups, so we'll have to do this twice. It just makes the bread fluffier. If you don't have a sifter, don't worry about it. And here's the other 3 cups. Okay, that's ready to put in smaller increments. Let's get some of that flour added. I'll add some of the flour before I turn the whole thing on. Just makes it a lot easier. Time to mix this amount up. Time to add some more. Time to do a little cleanup. Okay, this is how the dough looks. Looks pretty good. We'll take down the mixer and I will dig all this off, and then we can grease the bowl. I'm going to hand knead it a little more. We just need the oil in there so it won't stick to the sides of the bowl. We'll just do a little bit more hand kneading. Just so that the bread looks prettier. Everything's incorporated and it will rise very nicely. And there's our dough. Looks more like a sourdough. Okay, into the bowl it goes. Get a clean tea towel and cover it up and wait for it to rise double in bulk. It's time to clean up and feed my sourdough. I'm feeding the sourdough a half cup of flour and a 1/4 cup of warm water. And I stir it really well. Pretty soon I'll need to put it in a new bottle, just because of all this stuff that builds up on the side whenever I use it or feed it or stir it. Got to just get all that flour and water mixed up. I think it's the most amazing thing. That flour and water and the yeast in the air will make your own sourdough starter. You've got to try it. Okay, I think that's pretty good. It's hard to keep all this stuff off, so I just put it in a clean jar frequently. It's time to put on a clean paper towel and a rubber band. And so there you go. That is ready. The sourdough starter is ready to set on the counter overnight and be ready tomorrow to either take the discard off and keep that in a mason jar in the fridge, or to put it in the garbage or use it in a recipe. It's amazing stuff. You've got to try it. It is so good for your gut health and all that ails you. So please, don't be afraid of sourdough. It's really not a big deal. If I can do it, you can do it. Everything is cleaned up and I have the stand mixer put away. Now we are just waiting for the bread to rise. It's time to check our sourdough discard bread, and it looks really good. Okay, I am going to start making a loaf on some parchment paper. First thing I have to do is put the cast iron Dutch oven in the oven and get it super heated up. I have some parchment paper that I'm going to grease, and then I'm going to put half of the dough that I made today on the parchment paper, and then I'm going to brush it with butter and probably add the everything bagel seasoning after I split some decorative lines in it. Then let it rise. Meanwhile, I have the cast iron Dutch oven in the oven heating up on 425. Then I will put this dough on the parchment paper and in the cast iron. So I'm just going to split it in half. Take the dough out and shape it into a round disc. This is more artisan bread type stuff. And then I'm going to put it down on the parchment paper and find a sharp knife to cut the decoration in it. Okay, I'm going to attempt. This is not a very sharp knife, but I just used my only sharp knife. It may look like the decorations that you cut in it are not going to be very pretty, but it turns out to be very nice. Now if you want, you can also dust this with flour, which I think I'm going to do to make it look, I can't decide whether to dust it with flour and make it look more artisan, or to butter it with butter and put the everything bagel seasoning on it. Stay tuned. I've decided to dust it with a little flour. I don't think any of the everything bagel seasoning will stick to it, but we can try. Maybe some of it will bake in. Yeah, we'll just fill in the nice cuts that I made. Okay, so that looks all right. We're gonna let that set and rise again while the cast iron Dutch oven is heating up in the oven. I have enough dough left to make a regular loaf of bread, which is what I'm going to do with the last bit. I'm really liking this recipe. It was intended to be a hamburger roll recipe with sourdough discard, but I've used it twice now for just regular sandwich bread, and it's been really good. The reason I do this is to get the air bubbles out. My mother-in-law, who's been gone since 1998, taught me how to do that. And then you just place it in the pan and let it rise until double. And there it is. I wanted to learn how to use sourdough discard in yeast bread because of what Heather from Tomatoes, Poppies, and Everything mentioned about how good sourdough is for your gut health. So I'm going to start adding it to just about everything I can think of. I think some people even put a little bit in their meatloaf and different things like that. You can't taste it really. Just make sure you do a small amount. But then this is going to be working on your gut health and helping to improve it. Smart idea. Well, the bread turned out very beautifully. It looks very soft on the inside and nice and crunchy on the outside. It turned out very beautifully. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see you next time.